Okay, we're back. This is episode, I don't even know the number anymore, of the Ramey and Benny podcast. Good to have you here. Just because I always forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with anyone and everyone in the nonprofit world or people who are interested in nonprofits or nonprofit life. By all means, share. Ramey, how are you today?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you, Benny. How
Great.
are
You're
you?
coming to us from a different location than usual. You want to
It's
explain?
true. Yeah, it's true. I've been relocated out of my normal digs. My podcast studio uh, that doubles as my apartment's guest room, and we have relatives in, which I'm very thankful for. So I've been being relocated around the house to a different setting.
Okay, and as you can see on the screen, Ramey, we have a guest this week joining us for this week's episode. Do you want to make the intro?
Now, why don't you take this one, Benny? I feel like I've introed Joseph a fair number of times in my life. It's only fair that I let someone else
So much
introduce our
pressure.
guest
Oh my
here.
God. Okay, Joseph, how are you today?
Doing well, Baruch Hashem.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
how about
Where
you?
are you coming from to us today? It's not your house, is it?
No, I'm in Jerusalem at WeWork.
Awesome. Okay, good. So let's make this quick intro, and then we'll dive right in. We'll get Ramey the first question. By the way, the beard, Joseph, the beard is coming in beautifully on the video. I love it. You are keeping up with Ramey, although yours is less white than his is at the moment. But could be just
Miraculously.
okay, here we go. Joseph Bornstein is the founder and CEO of CauseMatch, a fundraising and engagement platform built to help mission-driven organizations raise more and operate more effectively. He bootstrapped CauseMatch from zero to millions in annual revenue in under 4 years, and the company is now backed by venture capital to support its next phase of growth. I'm super curious to hear more about the growth. Joseph began his career as a nonprofit founder after experiencing firsthand how limited and ineffective existing online fundraising tools were. He set out to build a better solution. That frustration became the foundation for CauseMatch, which now supports nonprofits around the world across a range of fundraising models and engagement strategies. As a founder and CEO, Joseph is focused not only on increasing nonprofit impact, but on building a high integrity, values driven team grounded in positivity, ownership, and service. He is also a Harry Truman Scholar and a Thomas J. Watson Fellow. Joseph, great to have you here.
Thank you, Benny. Thank you, Ramey. Great to be with you guys,
Amazing,
as
amazing.
always.
So we are certainly going to talk a lot about CauseMatch, but I want to start before then. I want you to take us back. Benny mentioned in the intro your journey as an early nonprofit founder. Can you tell us what that was like and what led you to founding CauseMatch?
Yeah, sure. So, like the 99.9% of nonprofits out there, funding is a major hurdle in order to be able to fuel and drive your mission, especially in the early days before you have a donor base and a community, reputation, right? Very much the chicken or the egg, right? So how do you create impact if you don't have funding? How do you give funding without impact? And so really creating something out of nothing, stone soup, if you will, for those of you familiar with that folklore. It was a true battle, and the quality of knowledge, tools, resources to make that stone soup, to succeed, to fundraise, to build community, to tap into the community that we did have. It was very much just like a bunch of one size fits all, very generic information, and didn't really help me elegantly or smoothly get to the next level. And, that very much planted the seed of there must be a better way to fundraise. If you're reading all the books, if you're learning about all the tools, and you're not finding the right application to scale, to grow, to raise, that's a meaningful seed planted.
What were
Well,
you
what
doing specifically at that time? You just full disclosure to everyone who's listening. I worked at Cosmos for 4.5 years. I know Joseph for longer than that, a little bit longer than that. Ramey longer than me in terms of his connection relationship to Cosmos and to Joseph. So just full disclosure, We know a lot about this stuff, but we want to share the founding story of it because I think it's super interesting. You were doing some specific kind of fundraising kind of work that at the time, and it wasn't just like you were sitting in an office somewhere and like, oh, I have this great idea and fundraising is bad for a lot of people. Let me try to do this. Like your lived experience, from my remembering the story, was a key factor that sort of drove
Yeah.
some of this. So can you share some of that too?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I think there were kind of two major elements there. So one, uh, you know, starting my nonprofit with some of my college and hometown buddies in Guatemala, Central America. It was a sustainable agriculture and food security nonprofit, and I was, very much a big part of the fundraising effort for that. And we were trying to do events, raffles, auctions, grant writing, direct solicitation, um, raising from our constituents, our beneficiaries. The farmers in Guatemala was not an option, so we were trying to raise money from donors back in the States. So that was kind of everything that we were doing within Semilla Nueva, the nonprofit in Guatemala. And then, kind of secondarily, when I moved here to Israel and was working with a nonprofit that was called Core 18 Leaders Lab, that was working to incubate Jewish leaders to launch their own nonprofits, we specifically did crowdfunding and worked with a bunch of different tools to try to help our fellows execute their crowdfunding. And that was also very informative because I got to see, tens and tens of campaigns interfacing with different fundraising tools. And then that kind of sheer data all in a very compressed time period helped reveal to me how much missed opportunity there was to fundraise in a smarter, better, more impactful way.
Interesting. But when you all right, so let's go back to the beginning stages of CauseMatch, because the way that I'm hearing you set this up is like you were almost looking for tools to be able to give fundraisers so that they could go and they could execute. But that's not what CauseMatch is. CauseMatch is not just a set of tools to give fundraisers where they go and they learn and they do it on their own. So can we go back to the early days of CauseMatch, a lot of which I remember, sitting in your apartment and having those whiteboard sessions with you, the early days. Like, how did those experiences that you had as a nonprofit founder or working for Core 18, how did those translate into those early stages of CauseMatch?
Yeah, so I mean, I think at the end of the day, you're 100% right. A tool that's like a very sort of open-ended, agnostic tool, let's say Excel, right? So Excel is an amazing tool, but if you don't have the right use case and application for that tool, what do you do with it, right? You need to be like a true master of Excel to just throw any data problem at me and I'll model it out, right? So for CauseMatch, the way that we started initially was very much, well, what are high impact fundraising tools for organizations? So, our very first iteration of that was matching, right? Running a matching campaign. And that was proved to be a very high impact fundraising tool. It makes people give at a higher frequency. It makes people donate at higher average values. It helps you mobilize people who wouldn't have stepped up otherwise. So that was kind of one tool, but not just a tool, a use case, a specific application and methodology that can truly help an organization raise much more money. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. So your original idea was to essentially take that and implement it into a platform that people could use to raise money.
Yeah, to like status quo, the average organization is raising about 20% of their annual budget on CauseMatch. Our customers are raising 20% of their annual fundraising budget on CauseMatch. So if you have enough good fundraising tools, or maybe even just one tool that's amazingly impactful, right? But you don't need to solve everything all at once to really move the needle for an organization in terms of their fundraising efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get anyone to say yes? Because I'll tell you where a couple of weeks ago we had on the podcast Rabbi Tuli Weiss, and
Mm-hmm.
he said he remembered you from way back at the beginning of the company, and you told him what you were doing, and he thought that's never going to work. And that's exactly what he said. It's not going to work. And my experience also, I remember I was running a nonprofit, 2011, 2012, around there. A different company reached out about this kind of crowdfunding thing, and I thought they were completely out of their minds that this would even work. And the president of my organization laughed me out of the room. So, and then years later, I ended up working with you on it. So, like when you started it, right? How did you pitch that or sell that to somebody to say, "Oh yeah, we should do this. We want to do this. This makes sense to us," and then sort of go from there?
Yeah. I mean, it's another miracle. Um, yeah, but in all, so firstly, I think it's, we mentioned this idea of stone soup,
Yeah.
right? That you start with water, you add a stone, then you add a little herbs, a veggie, and you sort of build up the reality of there being something actually compelling. So anytime that you're starting something new, it can't just be going from 0 to 60. You need to kind of incrementally create belief. So that's how CauseMatch started. So the very first person to believe in CauseMatch, who didn't say it won't work, but who said yes, I believe it will work, was really Rabbi Shore. It was Rabbi Shore and David Coleman along with him from Open Door Media. They were willing to, once they saw that I had built a platform. I remember this vividly. Rabbi Shore said, "Will it work? It won't break. Like, it'll work." He said, "Yes, we tested it. It should work." And after that, he had enough trust in me to make the intros. And he didn't introduce everybody all at once, but he introduced a certain number, and same with David. And then once they saw that it was good and successful and people raised hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Right.
he was very happy to make additional intros because that's a real win-win. So like most things in life, it does begin with relationships, and then that relationship, the person being willing to make a bet on you, there's always a risk. And then the more that you gain credibility, the more that they can be comfortable and be more helpful.
Do you remember in that time, was there something that you got wrong that became for you sort of a guiding light or a lesson that you were able to build on from then?
Yeah, so this is where the editing comes into play, right?
Yeah, that long
you
pause becomes just 1 second. You'd be like, "Wow, that was amazing how we pulled that
Yeah,
out."
amazing. Yeah, so I think that one of the lessons that took me really a while to appreciate with CauseMatch was there's such an energy and excitement to help the campaigns, to make the campaign successful, to grow as a company, to reach more organizations, etc. And so it's very much, hey, let's go out and help, let's go out and do and grow. But at the same time, the team, the human beings, the people who are there with you doing all of those things, they need to also feel taken care of, appreciated, part of something, cultivated themselves. Just like those clients, right? Just like those customers in a very different way. So, I would say that when I started CauseMatch, at first I thought that we were like a matching campaign company. Then I thought, okay, we're a fundraising, we provide different fundraising tools, technologies. Now, then more recently, we're a suite of fundraising tools and services. So we're a fundraising company. We help you not just with tools, but also services and support. And I'd say more recently that we not only help grow organizations, but we also help grow our team and our people. And that's just as much a part of what we do as a business, maybe even more than the customers that we serve. Because the people are the true engine of what we ultimately do. So they kind of match inextricably with one another.
Drill down a little bit deeper into that. What does that mean practically, like in terms of people on the team specifically? What does that look like?
It's a great question. Firstly, it starts very much with hiring. It's something you need to define. What are your values? What actually matters to you as an organization? It impacts how you spend your time. So, do you invest in creating awesome onboarding and training materials? When people are onboarding, do you spend hours with them every single week, making sure that they're getting properly onboarded and oriented? They come to you with a course that they want to take? Are you open to that in a serious way? And also the stories that you tell to each other, right? Is it culturally okay to say, hey, here's a problem, why don't you take care of it? I did my duty, I raised the problem. Or do you say, hey, why don't you think about it a little bit more and tell me some solutions that you think would be helpful for us to overcome this problem? What standards do you insist upon? Where do you draw the line? What do you push people to grow towards? And also me as a leader, am I abiding by those standards myself? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Am I being honest that if somebody calls me out on it, do I listen or not? So ideally it's impacting, just like it's impacting everything.
Right. So there's sort of like this parallel. I'm not even parallel, but there's like intrinsically related and like synthesized between the company values vis-a-vis the client and the company values internally towards the team and who's working with you. So those things have to be aligned, right? So that everything sort of works. Am I getting this right? In the right direction towards where you want to go, not just in terms of making profit or being financially successful, but being humanly successful as well.
Yeah, well said, Benny. And bottom line, if your team doesn't feel cared about and pushed to grow and supported to grow, then the customers aren't going to feel cared about and supported to grow and given the tools to grow, right? Like, right. How could it be? Why would maybe when you first hire somebody for this first 6 months, because of their good nature or whatever, they might, intrinsically do that. But that's a fire that needs continuous cultivation and care and support for it to keep going.
And how intentional are you about that in terms of your work as the CEO and the founder on a regular basis in terms of going back, stepping back, thinking about that, implementing differently, trying new things to keep that culture, company culture, growing, both sides of that?
Yeah. So I try to be very intentional, but it's not an easy endeavor, right? This is absolutely lahavdil, making values in Yiddishkeit, right? Making kavana when you daven, making so many things actually purposeful and with high intention. So we have so many different tools that can help us in theory that are baked into structure of the days and the nights and the weeks, but are we actually succeeding at that? So I think that values, mission, culture, all of those things are sort of similarly elusive and difficult to make alive.
Right.
And they do require constant intention, focusing on it, being thoughtful, changing your approach, etc. So, I think that, and probably there's periods where it's much better, and then periods where, oh yeah, that piece is missing. Let's try to redouble our efforts and make that more primary.
It's very cool to hear you talk about this because as someone who's been on the employee side of it and has felt the amazing positive effects of being in such a positive work culture like you've created, but I don't know that we've ever talked about it. I've ever heard your perspective on it thought out like this. So it's just a very, very, it's very cool experience for me here. I'm curious from your, it can't be, I can't think of a specific example right now, but it can't be that the many different sort of constituencies that you have, whether, and right now we're talking about your employees, but we've also talked about the clients and the customers, and then there's like the sort of the service to the bottom line and making sure that revenue needs to be where it is. There has to be situations where those things, there's not alignment, where a decision you make has to, we can't satisfy all three of those constituencies. Is there a way that you think through those decisions in your head? If something like, again, I'm trying to think of what a good example would be, but like if we need to satisfy a client request, and that will come somehow at the expense of empowering an employee to do his or her best work, or would come at the expense of a bottom line decision. Is there a way that you reconcile when those things are at head with each other?
Yeah, so I think that I understand what you're asking. So one of the sort of talking points that over the last couple of months that I've been sort of bringing up in the various meetings, which is one way that I like to express it, is that each person matters. Every single person matters. Each person matters is both from a customer perspective as well as an individual perspective on the team. Now, the team, the corporation, is a composite of individuals. So if you take that ethic of each person matters, then it forces you to think about the individual first and foremost. What is this person going through that needs support, or a more relaxed approach, whatever it is. But then also you have to keep primary the wider team, which is also individuals. So if you think about like a basketball team, right? So, if you have one person who, I don't know, they're amazing superstar, but they're hurting the rest of the team with the way they speak to the rest of the team, right? So yeah, that person matters, that superstar matters, but so does the rest of the team, who are also individuals, and that's the bigger picture at the end of the day. So you just taking that of each individual, that ethic of care, and applying it to the individual, but then also many other individuals. And then that helps you sort of balance out, okay, what is the action that needs to be taken? And then, of course, by default, Rami, you have to put a heavy, heavy emphasis on the customer. That's part of our culture, is devotion to the customer. And that's a deep ethic and a deep value of ours. And so, we really do push to give everything possible to the customer at the end of the day. And then if you find that you are repeatedly getting yourself into sticky situations where you have a tension between the customer needs and the individual team member needs, that means that you have an expectation or a system issue. So, for example, at CauseMatch, we have a 24/6 real-time support team, an amazing support team. Sorry for the plug, with a 15-second response time.
Well done. Always sales. I love it.
What can I say? So So the fact that they're there is a huge relief, because we are dealing with time pressured campaigns where there's a lot of stress, a lot of low sleep, a lot of pressure. And so having that support team is like a pressure release valve for the customer success team, who without that would be getting just pounded by the customers. And then I'd be putting them in a chronically unfair position. So if it becomes chronic, then that's a real problem that you, the leader, the manager, actually needs to solve.
I remember that my first year, I hit like May. May was like heavy season, and I had a like crazy number of campaigns going. I didn't leave my chair for like, it felt like days, because it just, there wasn't a big team at the time. We were a small team at the time, and it just felt like the fact that a campaign was on the West Coast versus the East Coast meant like I'm not moving, and I just got to be here available to them. And then once that 24/6 chat came into being, I think a year later or whatever it was like, oh, okay, that's a solve. That's really important, because then the team, like me in that space as a coach, could be fresh again the next day, as opposed to being like a zombie and available to everybody. But it was like a one of the things I still hear a lot from people who are clients of yours is about the customer support and the chat. So that's my plug back for you. Just in terms of, I hear it like people like that's a huge thing that there's someone who I can reach all the time when things are live that can really fix things on the go, and that's really, it's a huge, not expected. So it's a huge thing. I'm curious. I'm going to shift a little bit. Like when you think back in terms of your leadership history in the company, what's the hardest moment as a leader that you've had that I think maybe goes into some of the things that you just discussed, but maybe even beyond that, like something that, I don't know, a moment, a campaign. You don't have to get to a client specifically by name, but just something like that that really hits at like some of these deeper levels.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, very recently, when the Iran Israel war broke out, I mean,
Yeah,
and in the wake of October 7th as well. I mean, both of those were truly, truly traumatizing, truly transformative pauses of everything else, right? So those are two very big moments where, as a leader, it's like, okay, what do we do now? Especially with a team that's here, many people based in Israel. How do you handle that? So that was, I'd say, in recent history.
yeah,
I sort of want to zoom out a little bit because most of the people that are listening to this, by and large, are nonprofit leaders. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about this conversation is that what you're sharing is 100% applicable to the nonprofit sector, right? Nothing that you're speaking about is specific to, you know, fundraising platforms that are dealing with crowdfunding, whatever. This is applicable to anyone who's running a team and has multiple constituencies. And I guess I'm just trying to make sure we connect the dots here between, if we have a nonprofit leader who again has those different stakeholders, right? They're going to have the beneficiaries that receive the support that they provide. They're going to have donors. They're going to have a board. They're going to have all of these different people that they are in a lot of ways in service to. And so I guess, considering you have such an amazing perspective both on building a company and on the nonprofit space, how what can nonprofits learn from the way that your experience as a leader, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the ugly, like what can they take away as they're building their teams and thinking all of this through?
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for the kind words. And I think that maybe three things have been really like North Stars for me. So one is taking the time to make sure that you have invested in defining your values as an organization, because there's no road that's perfectly smooth, And without those values, you really don't have an orientation to help you navigate those difficult time periods. And you're your worst self when you're in the midst of a crisis, when you're in the midst of a challenge. So it's very valuable to have in advance not just tactical action plans, but to have an anchoring perspective, a guiding light, a North Star from a values point of view that you can actually refer to and will actually find clarifying and helpful. And in the business world, as well as the nonprofit sector, there's so many amazing stories about organizations in crisis, and they look to this piece of paper that nobody thought was so important, and they read it, they absorb it, and they make a decision, a critical decision based off of those values, and it leads them on the right path. So that's thing number one. I think thing number two is proper definition of expectations via ideally KPIs, key performance indicators, so people actually know what is expected of them in a very clear way. I'm a big fan of the Bernard Shaw quote, "The greatest impediment to human communication is the illusion that it has occurred." And so KPIs help ground and orient and make sure that everybody is aligned in terms of what are the expectations, what is my role, what's called a good day, what's called a good week, what's called a good month. And then the last is visibility around those KPIs as well as those values. How do you make sure that you're on track with regards to those KPIs and also with regards to the values that you've defined? Which is not simple, but sort of from a three principles perspective, I think that's very much the task at hand.
Translate that then into the work that you're doing, because over the years, it's thousands of different kinds of organizations from a lot of different places in the world. So you're able to sort of see some of the trends and some of the things they get right and some of the things that they get wrong. So based on what that three principle set and just your wider perspective on the sector, what are they getting wrong when they're using a platform like yours? What are they getting right? Like what are or even further, what are some of the truths that they really need to hear that they don't like to hear from, say, someone like you who is watching and who is paying attention, who is really keen on the trends and things that are happening for the typical nonprofit leader, again, no matter where they are. So dive into some of that, because I think that's like, people used to ask me all the time, what do we need to do? What are we going to get right? What are we going to get wrong? Like, okay, there's certain things. So share.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to be too much of the bad guy here, but
No, and not the bad guy. You're the solution ultimately. So like, it's like still sharing some of these things is really, you see what works. You can also share some of the good things that work. But everyone likes to hear the bad. It wasn't our organization that did that. It was the other guys.
Right.
So for the other people's organizations, share some of those ideas.
So I would say that firstly, a deep grasp of the data and really understanding what's available, what happened, what's going on with your fundraising, what's going on with churn, what's going on with conversion rates, what's your average gift size, how do people prefer to give, who are your top ambassadors, are you retaining them, are they growing year over year, are they reducing? Just deeply understanding your data picture is huge. When we rolled out a feature focused on donor retention that helps surface for nonprofits churned donors so that they could more effectively go after them and stack rank them by gift size, we saw a huge lift, like tens and tens of thousands of dollars of more retained donors giving value for a given campaign. It was amazing.
Just because they
saw it, and it was packaged in an actionable way that they could go after it through the platform. They could SMS them, they could WhatsApp them, they could see the ambassador that secured the gift, they could call them, right? So that data visibility with clarity of what am I supposed to do. And so if you are able to create that visibility for yourself, it's amazing. It's tens and tens of thousands of fundraising dollars available. So I think that that's number one. And then sort of working backwards is the KPIs, they create the discipline for you to know what you should be doing, right? I should be, just using the donor retention item, right? Every donor that was $1,000 and above, I should be picking up the phone, or at a minimum, a personalized WhatsApp, whatever it might be, right? Or you could divide it into 3. But then on top of that, we need a force function. Ideally, you have a force function which helps ensure that you actually do the thing. So the force function could be a coach, somebody who, you've hired. CauseMatch has our coaches, but it could be your, whatever it is internally, whatever it might be, that is holding you accountable to doing the smart moves. It could be you emailing a board member, the chairman of your board. I did these things throughout the campaign. These were my key actions, and I actually did them. But I'm really finding over time that force functions, in addition to the KPI, it's kind of like, Rosh Hashanah, we take on all of these Kabbalahs, and then do you actually do them? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But if there was a force function, if you tell your spouse, hey, I'm going to do this, or if you tell your Rav, hey, I'm going to do this, you're imposing upon yourself a force function, and then the probability of you actually doing what you've taken on increases meaningfully.
Right.
So it's the data, setting up the KPI, which is what is the action I'm going to do based off of the data, and then finding a system to ensure that you actually do what you want to do.
I assume most organizations are not doing that. It's just like a random. I'm just putting it out there. I may get a lot of grief for having said that out loud, but a lot of the time, maybe Ramy, you have different. Joseph, you have different. A lot of the organizations I speak to in that first conversation, one of the things I used to do when I was at the company, and I still do, that first conversation is tell me about your data, tell me about your donors. And recently, someone asked me why I do that. I said 2 things. One, I want to know the information. 2, more than anything, I want to know if they know the information. Because if they don't know the information, we are having a very different conversation after that. And then the engagement that follows is completely different, because as you said, the expectation level is completely different. You don't know who your donors are, where they come from, or how they engage with you, or the last time you spoke to them, or the percentage breakdown of your you don't know anything. So if you don't know that, at the time, I used to call it the money map, right? Knowing your money map
Right.
in the organization. Yeah. So people aren't doing that. So that's true still. That was true 100 years ago, right? It's still true today for organizations. They just have more tools available to do it. And you're still sharing that as like the number one thing that's still true.
Yeah. And I'm not sure how much if it's an issue of tools versus the right methodology. It's a deep question.
It's a fundamental. Like, before we do anything else, right? Learn about your data as a leader, as an organization. Forget about the tool you want to use and engage, or the platform you want to start working with, or the person you want to hire to write your copy. That's a plug for Amy, to coach your campaigns, someone like me, or hire CauseMatch to be the platform. I got everybody, right? I covered everybody there. Thank you. Well done. I'm learning my sales skills. Like, before that, data is still king, queen, and everything in between, right? Because unless you have that, you have nothing.
Yep. And actually, it's a very interesting. Sometimes tools can obfuscate the picture, because there's so many layers to them. There's all these pieces, and then if you have too many tools, are they all connected? Are you able to see a single source of truth in terms of responsibility? And so, over the last year or so, we've really tried to tighten down the number of tools that we use to create more of a crystal clear visibility on what are all of the motions going on inside the organization, rather than, oh wow, there's this new, whatever task management tool that has this and that. Really trying to narrow the number of tools and make sure that they are deeply interconnected with one another. And maybe that's another, I think, important point to share, Benny, is that we started off talking about like initial early phases of an organization.
Yeah.
And now sort of talking about once you're a bit bigger, a bit more mature, now becomes another sort of major hurdle and question, which is about connectivity. So when you're only 5 people in a nonprofit, connectivity is very easy. Everybody knows each other. Millions of data points are being shared organically. But then as the organization grows, that connectivity becomes increasingly difficult. And so, at CauseMatch, we also often say we're a knowledge company. We make knowledge. And what we mean by that is we try to really, really create clarity between people and between departments. What is our methodology? What is our process? What is the nuance that makes XYZ so powerful? And the bigger that you become, the more important it is to invest in creating that clarity and also connectivity between different departments, so that the software engineers have a deep connection with the coaches and the customer success and the sales team, etc. And that connectivity is what allows you to actually be successful, because the truth is the sort of the matrix, the synthesis of all of those different perspectives in a sharp, clear, powerful way. And without the connectivity, it's almost like the growth becomes a liability.
Right.
Because it's bigger, it's more expensive, it's more confused, and so there's more paths for disruption and things to just be muddled over time.
So can you put that back into the perspective of the nonprofit leader? Like you were just doing that from your perspective. What's that look like in a nonprofit?
I mean, I think it's true for in any organization. If you have X amount of budget, and let's say you're spending a good amount of money on marketing for something, and the marketing department is disconnected from whatever, right? The students that they're trying to recruit, or there's some nuance that they're just not properly as much as they need to be aware of a given topic. So that disconnect of let's say the teaching staff, or the people who are actually doing the fundraising with the donors, if they're not properly pulling that information into the marketing world, then that nuance might be a miss. And then that would be an important miss, because now you're spending all this money with the wrong message. And of course you can course correct this and that, but by the time it happens, message has already gone out, XYZ.
Love that. It's amazing to sort of see that the parallels that you're drawing between the company in that way and an organization, because I think a lot of the time, naturally, we separate those two things and we don't think of them in the same way. And so, nonprofits are different and businesses are different. And what you just described is like you could just plug and play. That's almost not every organization, but everything sort of has to have that. Otherwise, you'll always see that sort of breakage across all those different things. If you could also again, you're looking at a lot of organizations a year. It's hundreds, thousands. I don't know how many are using the platform on an annual basis, but like, what are you seeing trends wise in terms of nonprofits that are, red flags versus things that are like, this is something that people should be doing more of as you look at, different organizations. I talk to a lot of organizations, Ramy does as well. So I'm curious as to what you're hearing and seeing from people as you go year to year, building this platform, building this product, and the company.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that On the positive side, when you have an organization that is really putting forward a emphasis on donor cultivation and ambassador cultivation, that's a huge green flag. And that they also are interested and invested in understanding their data and being consistent. Those are big green flags. The red flags. So when an organization is struggling to keep up with themselves, that there's just too many things going on. So, every time you come to a meeting, the tasks have not been completed, the key things to get the right piece in place. And the problem with that is that, when you're behind on things, you're working from behind, and you're not getting ahead. So then the more that time passes, the harder and harder it is to be able to get ahead. And a lot of nonprofit leaders are in a very hard position where they have so many responsibilities and not so many people / resources to help delegate if they need to. And so that can be a real challenge. A board that really supports the leadership is also a really, really big piece. And there being a team of that they can actually delegate responsibilities to, and problem solve if they do start to get behind. Okay, how are we going to now get ahead? Because that can be a self-perpetuating cycle.
What excites you most about where the nonprofit space is heading?
Yeah. I think that overall, the nonprofit space is very much embracing technology. I think that AI has really just boom, like the technology is here, it's ubiquitous, it's not going anywhere, and there's a need to leverage technology effectively, and that it can actually be helpful to people at all different levels, right? A low tech person can upload an Excel and ask ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, whatever it is, to give them meaningful feedback about donor behaviors. They can ask questions about their donor database without crazy Excel chops. And more sophisticated can do other things as well. So kind of like what we saw in the wake of COVID, where all of a sudden Zoom and video meetings just became normal, and that kind of changed the way that we work. I think that the AI and the use of technology to really actually be helpful will also change kind of fundamentally an appreciation of being able to leverage tech to work smarter, to work more efficiently, and to do more meaningful, impactful work at the end of the day.
Are they? Are you seeing people? I'm curious. Are people using AI technology tools, um, or are they sort of not? Or because I always felt like nonprofits were slow to the get on the technology to begin with, platforms as an example. And in terms of AI, is that something where they are? You see it in the clients? Are you using that in terms of how you're working internally with clients the same way, introducing them to things, leveling them up a little bit? Like, is that happening?
I have definitely seen a number of leaders that are sort of, they have all sorts of different ways that they're using the AI, whether it's just to help them write a better email,
Yeah.
or whether it's to, tell them about, an Excel spreadsheet that would be really hard for them to analyze and digest, but it kind of helps them take a look at it. Some people are doing amazing things, like they're using the AI to write follow-up cultivation emails based off data points in their CRM through a Zapier or a make.com integration. And then it's just, doing that content generation for them. Images, I mean, there's some funny images out there, but that's another. It's save some time on the graphic design, save some costs for them, etc. So I'd say that everything, at the low end, helping me write a good email, and at the high end, automation with AI to streamline donor cultivation and engagement.
By the way, as you said that, I was thinking back. One of the things we always had crazy problems with clients is their taste on graphic design, the logos and the video and the imagery for their campaign pages. If we could just sort of given them a prompt and say, "Here, guys, you go figure this out," and we never have to deal with it again, that would have saved us a ton of headaches 5 years ago. In that, not a bad idea. Okay, anyway. We're running
Yeah.
low on time. We have a few minutes left. We go a little bit more rapid fire to a little lighter, a little bit more relaxed in these last few minutes of the podcast. So I think I remember this. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. But at a period of time, I remember you doing some sort of like a matcha kind of tea thing at some point. Am I right?
Yeah, so coffee is my main, and then the sort of gentle boost throughout the day is some tea.
I also know you are a very intense, crazy reader. I'd say 90 to 95% of the business books I've read in the last 10 years have been recommendations by you, and they've all made me much smarter. What's your most recent book that you've read that's made a real impact on the way you're thinking about things?
Yeah, great question. So one is escaping me the name, but Four Disciplines of Excellence I'll put out there. It's a great book.
Awesome.
4 Disciplines of Excellence. Okay, good. One habit that's helped you most as a founder?
I have a daily meditation card that I'm actually using AI now to create little icons for me of key lessons, key insights that I meditate on in in Shema Kolenu and Shemona Esrei, and the content of that card is always evolving as I sort of absorb a lesson, and so I can take one of those meditations off the card, and invariably a new item takes its place. It's a great way to bake in, Chazal say the greatest distance is between the heart and the mind.
Yeah.
So that's one force function that I can use to help me internalize and integrate some lessons that I know intellectually, but have a hard time incorporating into my kishkas.
Nice.
If you could have dinner with a historical figure, who would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. The Vilna Gaon.
Wow.
Yeah.
You want to explain that one to the audience because they don't know that?
Great Torah scholar, and transformed so much of Torah thought today. Living in Jerusalem, which he's, very much a lot of people follow his opinion in many things. Find he comes up all the time and is a very sort of mysterious. I don't know what the dinner would look like. I guess we would just learn some Torah together. Probably wouldn't eat.
I don't think he ate very much, so probably.
Yeah, I don't think there was much food.
A thought dinner, a thought activity.
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
good. I love that. What's one thing that fundraisers should stop doing?
So Rami taught me this one. They should talk more about making the donor the hero and less about how they themselves are the hero. People want to know, they want to make an impact, they want to make a difference in the world. And as a fundraiser, helping the donor understand how they are an agent of change and positive impact is absolute gold.
Yeah, good one.
Easy to say, hard to do.
Indeed.
But it's such a good one because when you show it to somebody and they flip it and they appreciate what the genius of it is, it's transformative for them as a leader and as an organization to see that flip. As much as I know when they start hearing it, they don't buy it. When they actually start to see it in action, it's a huge thing. Okay, last question. unless Ramy, you have one. Last question. What part of the work that you're doing is still feels sacred to you?
A lot. Bringing mission, values, purpose, team cultivation into the company feels deeply sacred, deeply challenging. Continuing to innovate and work on fundraising products and services that actually move the needle for organizations, deeply profound and meaningful. And this is sort of an interesting one. So I learned at Aisha Torah right by the Kotel.
Right.
And for maybe a year, it was amazing. I was by the Kotel. But very quickly, it sort of became, an obvious thing, and I didn't really appreciate it as much as I should have. So when I do take the time, going back to each person matters,
Yeah.
when I take the time to appreciate that a campaign is actually helping individual people, and I learn the stories about the people, it's totally sacred. But when it just becomes another number, another campaign, that's all it is. And that takes investment and work, but that's why we're here at the end of the day. And so it's worthwhile to connect with nonprofit leaders, hear the stories, connect with the students or the beneficiaries, hear those stories, watch the videos, because that's the goal at the end of the day is to lead a meaningful and a good life. So if we're spending most of our waking hours doing this, it's valuable to connect with the stories that you're a part of.
Amazing. Okay, with that, we are out of time for this round with you, Joseph. I want to thank you for joining us today on the podcast. As I said at the beginning, like, share, and subscribe. If you have any suggestions on guest topics or things we should be talking about during the course of this podcast week to week, please let us know. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye.
Okay, thank you.